Have you ever wondered what it feels like to stumble upon something so powerful, so inexplicably yours, that the world as you knew it shudders ever so slightly? You trudge through a chilly Edinburgh morning in the late 19th century, the mist curling around cobblestone streets like whispering ghosts, and spot a girl no taller than a broomstick, but with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. This is Minerva McGonagall before the legends, before Hogwarts, before the quiet thunder of her future authority. You probably won't survive this walk without a shiver, because Scotland in the winter bites, and young witches discovering magic rarely have a guide. So accidents are almost inevitable. She's 9, maybe 10, her hair tightly pinned, a book clutched under her arm. And yet there's already a stubborn glint in her gaze that suggests she will not be ignored. You watch, barely daring to breathe, as a teacup on the kitchen counter hops into the air, as though invisible fingers lifted it, spinning like it knows it's supposed to impress. Her mother's sigh carries across the room, half exasperation, half wonder, as she mutters, "Minerva, please, not the teacups again." But the girl barely blinks, her mind already jumping to her next experiment, perhaps turning the cat into a miniature lion, which would have been historically terrifying for the family. And yes, historically, cats were often seen as familiars in European households, though Scotland had its peculiar traditions about them. You follow her as she slips outside, boots crunching snow and mud, and you notice how she crouches, watching the way frost clings to the blades of grass, calculating, imagining, testing. There's a quirky thought here. Some fringe historians speculate that early magical ability could be influenced by lunar cycles and Scottish fog density, a debate still open in certain wizarding circles. So you might as well chalk up the way her spells flicker unpredictably to the environment. And then she finds it. A stray toad sitting complacently in a puddle, looking completely unremarkable, except she stares at it for a long, measuring moment before murmuring an incantation, and suddenly it hops in precise geometrical arcs. Like it's performing a choreography it's always known in its secret amphibian brain. You lean closer, though you know better, because proximity tends to get you in trouble, and witness that first spark of confidence that will define her. You realize she's not simply curious. She's calculating, principled, and unusually patient for her age, traits that will serve her in ways the wizarding world cannot yet imagine. Her father's letters arrive sporadically from India, thick with tales of bureaucracy and family obligations, and she reads them in the lamplight while balancing quills and an ink pot that has mysteriously been levitating next to her. You can almost hear her muttering to herself, balancing moral philosophy with magical technique. There is a right way to do this, and a correct way to do that, and perhaps the world will catch up to me eventually. You might chuckle, because the scene is oddly domestic, yet underlined, with the kind of quiet intensity that makes history books swoon when they eventually write about her. The air smells faintly of peat and burnt wood, and somewhere, a stray cat observes her movements with what seems like approval or judgment. It's hard to tell. By now, the shadows lengthen, the streets grow colder, and yet she remains at the window, staring at a patch of sky where clouds swirl unnaturally fast, contemplating whether she could levitate the rain next, or perhaps write her first essay in Transfiguration before breakfast. You feel the electric hum of potential crackle around her, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. And just when you think she might tip over into ordinary childhood, she does something so subtle, adjusting her posture, flicking a strand of hair, whispering a perfectly measured incantation, that you realize the early McGonagall is already legendary in miniature, and you, dear listener, are witnessing it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you do that, drop a quick note in the comments. Where are you listening from, and what's your local time? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You glide across the mirrored surface of the Hogwarts lake, the early morning mist curling around your ankles like cautious fingers, and you can almost taste the magic that hangs thick in the air, a mixture of wet stone, slightly burned parchment, and a faint whiff of cauldron stew someone forgot to stir last night. You're here with Minerva, now a slightly older teenager, though her posture and gaze suggest she's already several lifetimes ahead of her peers. The castle looms before you, its towers and turrets punctuating the sky like spires of ambition. You feel a shiver of anticipation, or is it fear, as the Sorting Hat slides onto her head with a soft, sentient whisper, probing the depths of her mind with questions you can't hear but feel vibrating in your own thoughts. Courage, intellect, loyalty, cunning. There's a historical note tucked in the edges of your awareness. Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago by 4 witches and wizards, whose ideals still spark debate among scholars. How much of the Sorting Hat's advice is truly objective, and how much is shaped by centuries of personal bias? The Hat teases her gently, suggesting Slytherin ambition, Ravenclaw cleverness, and then pauses, sensing the unusual blend of principles and practicality in her mind, finally landing decisively on Gryffindor with a decisive whisper you almost hear as a gasp. Bravery isn't just a sword, child. It's a mind that dares. You watch Minerva sit upright, the hat sliding off, her green eyes glinting with the subtle thrill of destiny, and you feel the same tickle in your spine that most first years feel but can't name. Hogwarts is a place that changes everything. You wander with her through the stone corridors, your footsteps echoing on the ancient floors, and notice how she studies the tapestries, the suits of armor, the very way the portraits watch you back, as if the walls themselves are alive. A fringe notion, of course, but one Hogwarts students whisper about in corners at night. You trail her to the Great Hall, where the enchanted ceiling mirrors the sky above, and the smell of breakfast, slightly sweet and slightly burnt, mingles with the faint ozone of magic. You spot a raven hopping along the windowsill, and you note that in some obscure magical texts, ravens were historically considered familiars of wisdom and prophecy, though the scholars argue endlessly over whether this was metaphor or a real magical principle. As Minerva sits with her new housemates, you notice her subtle interactions, polite but precise, teasing but controlled, a chess player among rookish children, and you realize this is where her leadership first takes shape. She observes the small skirmishes over food, the whispered alliances forming between clever and daring students, and even as she laughs softly at a joke about a second year who turned his own tie into a snake, you recognize the undercurrent of strategy. She isn't merely surviving Hogwarts. She's learning it, mapping it, understanding how the currents of personality and power flow through the castle like invisible rivers. You follow her into her first classes, feeling the tickle of broomstick bristles and the scent of ink and parchment, and she's already pushing boundaries, questioning teachers politely, exploring the limits of magic while maintaining a strict moral compass. You notice her fascination with Transfiguration, and a tiny thrill dances through the room as she turns a feather into a miniature silver fan with a flick of her wand. The other students gasping, the teacher raising an intrigued eyebrow. There's a quirky note here. Some old scrolls suggest that Hogwarts staircases may shift slightly in response to students' intentions or emotional states. A fringe theory debated endlessly in wizarding journals. And you swear you feel the steps tilt subtly as she walks, as if the castle itself acknowledges her presence. And just as you start to wonder if the Sorting Hat was truly necessary for someone like her, Minerva pauses at a window, watching the sunrise over the lake, calculating, dreaming, and silently promising herself that she will not merely attend Hogwarts. She will shape it. The wind presses against your cheeks, as if sharing a secret, and you feel the first real tremor of anticipation for the extraordinary life that lies ahead. You trail Minerva through the cobbled courtyards of Hogwarts during her Gryffindor years, feeling the pulse of youthful energy and whispered secrets wrapping around you like a warm, slightly damp cloak. Because here, in these ancient halls, every corner holds a potential spell, a prank, or a lesson waiting to unfold. You watch her duck under a swinging portrait frame, barely avoiding a first year who trips spectacularly over his own robe, and you notice how she tilts her head, calculating, observing, a small smirk tugging at her lips, the first hint that cleverness and daring coexist in her mind like coiled spring magic. The castle hums with life. Enchanted suits of armor march lazily down hallways, floating candles bob in the great hall, and somewhere nearby, a portrait whispers advice to a student who is clearly ignoring it. Hogwarts feels alive, and you can't help but wonder if the house elves secretly vote on which students they like best, a fringe theory that some historians entertain while debating the ethics of magical servant labor. You stick close as Minerva practices spells in the common room, quietly transfiguring cups into tiny frogs, then back again. Each movement precise, deliberate, almost like a dance only she fully understands. There's the occasional prank she can't resist. A third year's quill starts scribbling its own sarcastic commentary on homework assignments, and you stifle a laugh as the student stares in horror, wondering if the castle itself has gone mad. You feel the hum of magic in every corner, the smell of polished wood and parchment blending with the faint tang of potion ingredients left too long on the windowsill. And you note historically that student life at Hogwarts has always combined rigorous study with mischievous exploration, a duality that seems essential to the school's legendary survival. Minerva navigates classes and corridors with grace, balancing obedience with rebellion. She answers questions before they are asked, challenges teachers' assumptions without ever being disrespectful, and quietly records observations in her notebook, an early version of her lifelong habit of meticulous documentation. You sense her loyalty to friends growing quietly, forming bonds that will later sustain her during the darker years, though now they are tested in dueling clubs and clandestine midnight excursions to forbidden sections of the library. A quirky historical note surfaces. Some scholars suggest that early 20th century magical education emphasized cleverness over empathy. Yet Minerva seems to intuitively blend both, sparking debate among her professors about what constitutes true magical genius. You watch her in dueling practice, wand movements sharp, posture rigid but fluid, incantations precise, the faint smell of ozone mingling with her hair as sparks dance along her fingertips. And you realize that each duel isn't just about skill, but about understanding intent, predicting movement, and exercising patience, a skill many of her classmates overlook entirely. Between classes, she sneaks time in the library, exploring obscure texts on charms and magical theory, muttering to herself in soft tones, and you hear fragments of a playful internal monologue. If I adjust the wand's angle here, perhaps the transformation will be more stable. But then again, is stability worth sacrificing elegance? Her intelligence isn't flashy. It's a quiet, relentless current beneath the surface. And you can't help but admire how she balances her natural gifts with discipline, curiosity, and just enough mischief to keep life interesting. One afternoon, a stray cat weaves around her ankles, and you notice that she talks to it in tones normally reserved for humans, debating the ethics of turning objects into animals, a fringe practice whispered about in secret wizarding journals. Though she does it gently, ethically, carefully, by the end of her Gryffindor years, you feel a shift in the air around her, The girl who once caused teacups to leap now radiates quiet authority, intelligence tempered with empathy, and a daring that hints at future legendary deeds. The castle seems to acknowledge her growth, staircases subtly tilting in her favor, portraits inclining as she passes, and even the common room feels warmer somehow, infused with the energy of a mind that will one day guide generations. You wander through the echoing corridors of Hogwarts with Minerva as she steps into her first teaching role, and the castle feels simultaneously familiar and strangely new, like an old book suddenly revealing a hidden chapter. The stone walls hum with the energy of students, some bright-eyed, some nervous, and all unprepared for the subtle iron-fingered control she wields beneath her calm demeanor. You watch her stride into the classroom, robes swishing, hair pinned neatly, eyes glinting with quiet authority, and you realize immediately that she is both kind and exacting, a rare combination that sends shivers down the spines of young witches and wizards who don't yet understand that discipline can feel like care. The scent of parchment, chalk dust, and slightly singed magical residue drifts through the air as she demonstrates a simple transfiguration exercise. A matchstick into a tiny iridescent bird that flutters briefly before perching obediently on a student's shoulder. And you catch the gasps, chuckles, and whispered admiration. There's a historical thread woven into the moment. Hogwarts' teaching methods have evolved since the school's founding, often debated by scholars who argue whether hands-on magical experience outweighs rote memorization. And Minerva embodies a subtle revolution, blending strict rules with encouragement, clever demonstrations with moral guidance. You linger near the back, noticing how she balances attention between students, quietly correcting mistakes with a single word, a lifted eyebrow, or a soft suggestion. And somehow she makes it feel like discovery rather than correction. Even the most timid child dares more under her gaze. Outside the classroom, she navigates corridors with a keen sense of timing and rhythm, preventing minor conflicts, intercepting mischievous duels before they escalate, and occasionally flicking her wand to correct a broom that's gone rogue in flight. Small acts, but gestures that quietly shape the order and flow of Hogwarts life. You detect her humor peeking through in tiny ways, a mischievous quip about a student's lopsided hat, an exaggerated sigh at a first year's confused wand movements. 3 moments of levity tucked into every rigidly structured lesson, just enough to remind the students that magic, though serious, is also joyful. A fringe fact drifts into your awareness. Some obscure magical historians claim that early 20th century witchcraft education relied heavily on silent meditation and elemental alignment. But Minerva seems to intuitively blend this philosophy with practical exercises, a hybrid approach still debated in certain academic circles. You follow her into staff meetings, where she navigates rivalries and subtle power plays with measured grace, never dominating the room, yet influencing decisions with razor-sharp logic and the occasional pointed comment that leaves colleagues blinking and reconsidering. You sense that she is learning as much as she teaches, how to command respect without fear, how to inspire effort without pressure, how to balance tradition with innovation, all while carrying a quiet, personal moral compass that guides her every decision between lessons. She sneaks moments of reflection, wandering the courtyards, listening to the wind swirl around gargoyles, pondering how a spell might be improved or a lesson clarified. The faint metallic tang of magic on her fingertips blending with the earthy smell of wet stone and old leaves. You notice the students notice her too. They whisper, they admire, and occasionally they dare to challenge her, each encounter sharpening her patience and fortitude. And when the day winds down, she stands by a sun-dappled window, watching the lake shimmer, murmuring to herself, balancing pride and caution, already envisioning the next day, the next spell, the next lesson, knowing she is quietly forging not just knowledge but a culture of thoughtful, ethical magic, one young witch or wizard at a time.
You step into the dimly lit Transfiguration classroom with Minerva, now a confident young professor, and the air vibrates with the soft hum of potential, a mixture of heated cauldrons, ozone from sparking wands, and the faintly metallic scent of enchanted chalk dust. Every corner of the room seems alive, waiting for her command, acknowledging that this is her domain, where theory meets precise, transformative magic. You watch as she demonstrates a particularly intricate transfiguration. A wooden chair dissolves into a flurry of golden butterflies, which hover briefly before settling gracefully on a student's shoulder, and the combination of elegance, precision, and control makes you catch your breath in subtle awe. There's a historical angle here. Transfiguration has long been considered one of the most difficult magical disciplines, debated among scholars over whether true mastery requires innate talent, endless practice, or a combination of both. And Minerva seems to embody the argument for skill honed by discipline, proving skeptics wrong with every flick of her wand. You follow her through a maze of student desks, noticing how she calibrates instruction, tailoring corrections to individual temperament, patience for the timid, challenge for the bold, and always a sly glimmer of humor that keeps her classroom alive, even when the spells grow dangerous. The students watch, fascinated, as she casually explains the nuances of magic, why a spell might stabilize with one subtle wrist motion, why intent and moral clarity shape the outcome, and even how magical theory can sometimes conflict with practical execution, a tension that has inspired debate in wizarding journals for decades. A quirky fringe observation crosses your mind. Old manuscripts hint that some Transfiguration masters preferred speaking to inanimate objects as if negotiating with them, an eccentric method Minerva occasionally experiments with, murmuring softly to a stubborn chair until it complies, her green eyes twinkling with barely contained amusement. You follow her beyond the classroom, into the staff common room and library, where she devours ancient texts, comparing early magical theory with contemporary practice, scribbling notes on efficiency, ethical application, and subtle enhancements to spells that most wizards wouldn't even consider attempting. Rivalries emerge too, of course. You sense tension with a particularly boastful professor who underestimates her quiet authority, the kind of academic duel that doesn't involve wands but leaves sparks in every meeting, rumors swirling like smoke around the staff table. And yet she handles it with calm intellect, occasional sharp wit, and an unflappable moral grounding that leaves colleagues frustrated and impressed simultaneously. You trail her to an impromptu practice session in the empty hallways, where she experiments with larger, more ambitious transformations, turning a pile of discarded books into a miniature archway, carefully controlling weight, balance, and timing, while you can't help but wonder if Hogwarts itself hums in approval, responding subtly to the touch of her wand. Between her rigorous training and natural genius, you notice students flocking to her guidance, drawn not by fear, but by admiration. She sets high standards, demonstrates the impossible, and quietly teaches patience and confidence, leaving young witches and wizards in awe of what can be achieved with focus, clarity, and ethical intent. And as twilight falls, she pauses at a window overlooking the lake, wand tucked under her arm, muttering softly about the potential of magic to both shape the world and reflect the character of the magician, the faint reflection of moonlight on the water mirroring the sparkle in her eyes, signaling the emergence of a true Transfiguration master whose reputation is only beginning to ripple beyond the castle walls. You follow Minerva through shadowed corridors and candlelit classrooms as the wizarding world darkens around her, and the tension is almost tactile, like a current of cold air brushing against your neck. Because Voldemort's rise isn't a distant headline. It's a creeping presence that seeps into every corner of Hogwarts, testing courage, loyalty, and wisdom in ways textbooks cannot teach. You sense the quiet weight she carries, letters arriving in hurried, coded scripts, rumors whispered in the library, and fleeting moments where she pauses in the hall, hand resting lightly on a doorknob, listening for footsteps that might signal danger or opportunity. The smell of damp stone, ink, and faintly singed parchment fills the air as she organizes secret lessons, clandestine dueling practice, and protective spells for students who are too young to understand why courage must sometimes be quiet. You watch her strategy unfold. She is patient, yet precise, balancing the need for information with the imperative to maintain morale, knowing full well that one misstep could tip the delicate scales in a world already teetering. There's a historical anchor here. During the first rise of dark wizards in the 20th century, Hogwarts served as both sanctuary and battlefield, though few historians fully capture the moral complexity of the staff's decisions, and you can see Minerva's choices threaded through the ongoing scholarly debate about ethics in times of magical crisis. You trail her into a small, secret alcove near the astronomy tower, where she meets trusted colleagues, quietly exchanging information and developing contingency plans. The flickering torchlight casting long shadows that seem to echo the very fears she must manage and mask. A fringe magical theory drifts across your mind. Some believe that the castle's enchantments subtly shift in response to emotional intensity, strengthening around those who demonstrate calm resolve. You swear the walls themselves seem to lean toward her, as if acknowledging the weight of her bravery. You notice her small acts of care, adjusting a cloak for a shivering first year, offering a gentle correction to a nervous student's wand work, providing guidance in ways that teach confidence rather than compliance, and all of it done while maintaining a strict sense of personal and professional ethics. You walk with her through dueling practice, observing how she trains students not just to fight, but to think, to anticipate, to act with deliberate caution, skills that may save lives when the inevitable confrontation arrives. The air is thick with a blend of ozone, damp earth, and the faint tang of tension, and you realize that every corridor, every classroom, every whispered instruction is part of a larger choreography. Hogwarts itself becomes a chessboard, with Minerva moving pieces carefully, invisibly, and courageously. Humor is rare but present. A carefully timed quip to a nervous student about the oddity of a self-tying tie sparks a reluctant smile, reminding you that even in darkness, humanity and levity persist, softening the edges of fear. You note the debates she internally wrestles with, how much risk is acceptable, when to assert authority, when to step back, and how to prepare a generation to face an evil that is relentless, clever, and morally unbound. And as night descends, she pauses at the edge of the lake, wand in hand, reflecting silently, the stars mirrored in the water, as if each spark represents both a life to protect and a spell to master, the weight of courage and foresight settling into the quiet, unwavering presence that will define her during the darkest hours Hogwarts has ever faced. You walk beside Minerva as she assumes her role as deputy headmistress, and the castle feels subtly different now, quieter, heavier, yet alive with anticipation, as if the stone itself recognizes a new layer of responsibility pressing against her shoulders, soft yet unrelenting. You notice how she navigates the staff room, balancing protocol with personal insight, correcting minor infractions with a single sharp glance, while encouraging ambitious but unruly colleagues with carefully chosen words. It's a dance of diplomacy, authority, and empathy, all performed with a rhythm that seems effortless, though you know every movement is calculated. The smell of old parchment and freshly polished wood mingles with the faint scent of herbal potions as she reviews student files, disciplinary records, and lesson plans. And you feel the pulse of logic running through her actions, tempered with the moral compass that guides her, even when choices are morally complex. You follow her into meetings with teachers who often bristle at her quiet insistence on fairness. A whispered debate about curriculum adjustments, grading policies, and magical ethics flows around you, with one professor's ego occasionally tangling against her calm, precise reasoning, producing sparks of tension that could ignite chaos. Yet she diffuses them with subtle humor and perfectly timed insight. There's a historical fact tucked here. Hogwarts deputy heads historically had varying influence, depending on the temperament of the headmaster or headmistress, a point of debate among scholars. But it's clear to you that Minerva's presence reshapes the balance, creating a culture of integrity, rigor, and understated guidance. You trail her through disciplinary hearings, observing her ability to inspire compliance without intimidation, correcting misbehavior with logic and gentle sarcasm, sometimes provoking a reluctant grin from a student who expected only a scolding. 3 little jokes per encounter ripple like quiet spells, softening tension without diminishing authority. In quiet moments, she wanders the castle alone, listening to the hum of moving staircases, the subtle whispers of enchanted suits of armor, and reflecting on the ethical complexities of leadership. When to intervene, when to guide, when to allow natural consequences to teach their lesson. A balance debated endlessly in wizarding pedagogical circles. A fringe tidbit drifts into your awareness. Some ancient magical manuscripts suggest that a leader's aura can subtly influence enchanted architecture, creating corridors that feel more welcoming or imposing depending on intention. A theory you can't help but test, as staircases seem to tilt in her favor, guiding her smoothly through the castle. You notice her small human quirks, too. A brief sip of tea before a meeting, a soft humming of an old tune as she files papers, the faint adjustment of glasses. Reminders that beneath her iron discipline is a woman who navigates magic, administration, and personal ethics with grace. Even when tensions flare between professors, students, or magical creatures, she maintains calm, applying principles of fairness and clear thought, occasionally allowing a playful jab at pompous colleagues that reminds you of the sly humor tucked into her otherwise stern exterior. You feel the magnitude of her role as she surveys the castle in the late afternoon light, considering security measures, lesson plans, and student welfare simultaneously, balancing innovation with tradition, and realizing that her leadership is both subtle and profound, shaping the very rhythm of Hogwarts life in ways that will ripple through generations. And when she finally pauses by a window overlooking the lake, wand resting lightly in hand, you glimpse her private contemplation, the unspoken acknowledgement that every decision carries weight, that guidance requires courage, and that in quiet, measured ways, she is crafting a legacy of intelligence, ethics, and quiet authority that will endure long after the castle's stones forget the names of those who walk its halls. You step into the chaos of Hogwarts as the battle looms, and the castle feels alive in a way you've never sensed before. Corridors humming with tension, enchanted suits of armor shifting into defensive stances, and staircases twisting unpredictably as if anticipating the strategies of those who tread upon them. You watch Minerva move through it all with an astonishing blend of precision, courage, and quiet authority, orchestrating protective enchantments while delegating tasks to staff and older students with a calm that belies the storm gathering outside the walls. The air smells of scorched stone, faint gunpowder-like sparks from misfired spells, and the earthy tang of freshly disturbed gardens where barricades and protective wards have been hastily erected. It's intoxicating, nerve-wracking, and alive with magic. and you can feel the subtle vibration of every spell she casts resonating through the castle. Historically, Hogwarts has weathered many threats, yet this confrontation is unique in scope and peril, a fact that continues to provoke scholarly debate about the effectiveness of defensive enchantments versus student-led resistance in magical battles. You trail her as she moves through classrooms, guiding students to safer locations, offering encouragement to frightened first-years, and quietly correcting tactical errors in dueling practices with a flick of her wand or a single-pointed instruction, all without losing composure. Fringe whispers drift through the air. Some wizards claim that castle portraits can subtly assist in battle by influencing intruders' perception, a controversial theory that Minerva seems to exploit subtly, giving an almost imperceptible nod here or a gesture there to summon assistance. Sparks and light ricochet off walls as she demonstrates warding techniques in real time, turning objects into shields, reinforcing doorways with runes, and subtly redirecting aggressive spells, a choreography of magic that seems equal parts art and science. Humor flickers even here. A second year accidentally transfigures a pumpkin into a squeaking hedgehog, and she murmurs a gentle quip about the hazards of enthusiasm, prompting a nervous laugh that echoes softly amid tension, a reminder that courage does not exclude levity. You notice the intensity of her strategic mind, planning multiple contingencies, anticipating enemy movements, calculating risk while preserving life, and constantly reassessing the flow of battle, a practice that scholars would later cite as exemplary of applied magical intelligence under duress. The wind presses against the windows, carrying the faint echoes of distant explosions and the whispers of anxious students, and you feel the palpable hum of responsibility and bravery surrounding her, a protective aura that seems to ripple outward, steadying those around her even when fear threatens to overwhelm. At the heart of it all, she is simultaneously leader, teacher, and shield. Her wand precise, voice calm, decisions decisive, and you sense that every choice carries both immediate consequence and long-term ripple, her influence shaping not just the battle's outcome, but the character and courage of everyone present. And as the night grows deeper, you glimpse her pause atop the highest tower, green eyes scanning the horizon, wand ready, mind calculating, heart steady, embodying the very essence of bravery tempered by wisdom, the quiet force that will help turn chaos into survival, and eventually a legendary victory that cements her as an unshakable presence in Hogwarts history. You step into the polished corridors of Hogwarts with Minerva as headmistress, and the castle feels different now, not just alive, but attuned to her presence, as if every stone, staircase, and portrait acknowledges her authority and subtle command. The smell of waxed floors, old parchment, and a faint trace of peppermint wafts through the air, mingling with the soft hum of magic flowing beneath her fingertips. You follow her as she greets staff and students with measured warmth, balancing the weight of leadership with the personal touch that makes each individual feel seen, while the administrative labyrinth of schedules, curriculum planning, and disciplinary oversight swirls invisibly around her. And yet she moves through it all with the elegance of someone who has long since mastered both patience and decisiveness. Historical context whispers from the walls. Few headmistresses in Hogwarts' long history manage to simultaneously inspire loyalty, enforce discipline, and innovate educational practices without tipping the delicate balance of tradition, a challenge still hotly debated by magical historians who argue whether reform or continuity ensures the school's longevity. You trail her into classrooms where she demonstrates a rare ability to teach by example, effortlessly blending transfiguration prowess, practical spellwork, and moral guidance, often correcting a miscast charm with a soft word. or a small, elegant flick of her wand, leaving students in awe yet quietly encouraged. A fringe magical observation drifts to your attention. Some old texts suggest that Hogwarts itself subtly amplifies the intent and focus of a headmaster or headmistress, though scholarly consensus remains divided. You swear the portraits nod subtly as she passes, the banners shift imperceptibly, and even the enchanted windows seem brighter when she gazes through them contemplatively. You notice the smaller human details too. She sips tea in quiet corners, hums faintly while reviewing notes, adjusts her spectacles absent-mindedly, and occasionally allows herself a sly joke or pun to relieve the tension of responsibility. 3 tiny sparks of levity that ripple through the staff and students alike. Her influence stretches beyond academics. She fosters mentorship programs, encourages independent magical research, and subtly reshapes Hogwarts culture to prioritize integrity, critical thinking, and courage, while still maintaining a firm adherence to the school's rich traditions and values. You witness the careful diplomacy required in balancing house rivalries, teacher egos, and the occasional mischievous student prank, all managed with a combination of wit, moral clarity, and strategic foresight that leaves even seasoned staff humbled. She navigates crises with calm efficiency, a misfired charm, a dueling club mishap, a sudden enchanted fire alarm, and each situation is resolved seamlessly, demonstrating the quiet power that comes from experience, discipline, and unwavering courage. You feel the subtle, almost magical weight of her leadership. It shapes the rhythms of daily life, the tone of instruction, and the moral compass of a generation of witches and wizards, all without requiring overt displays of power. And when she pauses at the window overlooking the lake at dusk, wand in hand, green eyes reflecting the setting sun, you understand fully that she is not merely headmistress. She is a custodian of knowledge, courage, and ethical magic. A living legend whose presence imbues Hogwarts with steady, quiet strength, innovation tempered by wisdom, and a legacy that will endure far beyond her own years. You wander through the quiet halls of Hogwarts with Minerva in the twilight of her career, and the castle seems to breathe with the weight of history, echoing with decades of whispered spells, laughter, and quiet triumphs, each stone resonating subtly with her presence, as if acknowledging the decades she has shaped its spirit. You notice the traces of her influence everywhere. Students walk with confidence she instilled. Classrooms hum with the discipline and curiosity she cultivated, and even the portraits appear more attentive, tilting slightly, as if eager to recount tales of her guidance to new generations. The scent of old parchment, polished wood, and the faint metallic tang of residual magic fills the corridors as you follow her to the staff room, where colleagues greet her with respect, laced with genuine affection, aware that she balances authority with empathy in ways that few have ever achieved. Historical records, often dry and formal, struggle to capture the essence of her legacy. While she is celebrated for her magical mastery, particularly in Transfiguration, her quiet moral guidance and deft leadership remain harder to quantify, fueling ongoing scholarly debate about how personal character shapes institutional history. You trail her to the library, where she meticulously catalogs spells, annotations, and magical theories, some centuries old, others experimental, ensuring that Hogwarts' knowledge base is both preserved and evolved. A fringe curiosity appears as she experiments occasionally with minor self-sustaining enchantments, books that hover and whisper summaries, provoking soft chuckles even in the most serious students. You watch her mentoring young witches and wizards, observing subtle body language, gently correcting errors, and allowing failures to teach lessons without shaming. The 3 sparks of humor she occasionally inserts creating a lightness in the otherwise intense learning environment. She reflects often on the battles she has witnessed, the time she led students through peril, and the quiet courage required to make impossible choices, blending it with a pragmatic optimism that allows Hogwarts not just to survive, but to thrive, a philosophy that scholars continue to cite and argue about in ethical magical pedagogy. The corridors at night shimmer with a faint magical luminescence as you accompany her on her rounds, the wind rustling the lake's surface outside, carrying memories of duels, whispered incantations, and fleeting moments of student laughter. You can almost feel the cumulative magic of her life infusing the castle, subtle yet omnipresent, a testament to decades of deliberate ethical influence. She pauses at a familiar window, gazing across the black water reflecting starlight, her wand resting lightly in her hand, a soft smile touching her lips. And you understand that her legacy is not simply in spells mastered or lessons taught, but in the very ethos of Hogwarts, the courage, wisdom, and integrity she nurtured, rippling outward through countless generations, quietly shaping the future of magical education. And as the night deepens, you feel a soft calm settle over the castle, knowing that her influence is enduring, her guidance eternal, and that Hogwarts itself has been irrevocably transformed by the most powerful witch to ever walk its halls, a presence that whispers through history, magic, and memory alike. Now, you move slowly through Hogwarts, with her spirit lingering in every corridor, and the castle exhales gently, a soft, reassuring rhythm that matches your own heartbeat. The shadows stretch long but feel safe, the stone cool beneath your fingertips, and the distant murmur of the lake outside reminds you that time flows steadily, that history carries on quietly, without rush. You imagine her wandering these halls in stillness, wand tucked under her arm, eyes reflecting the starlight, observing life with a calm curiosity, and somehow, even in silence, she teaches patience, reflection, and the quiet courage of choosing right over easy. The warmth of enchanted lamps, the soft whisper of moving portraits, and the faint, comforting smell of old parchment create a cocoon around you, each detail grounding you in the steady rhythm of Hogwarts life. You notice the subtle sounds, the shuffling of robes, the occasional giggle of lingering students, the creak of staircases adjusting on their own. These small moments feel infinite, gentle, and filled with possibility, reminders that magic is not just spells and duels, but care, attention, and patience carried through time. You sense her presence like a soft hum, a guiding thread woven into every lesson, every rule, every act of kindness, and it wraps around you like a protective charm, quieting anxieties and lending perspective. As the night deepens, the castle seems to breathe with you, the windows reflecting distant stars, the corridors filled with memories and potential alike, and you realize that some legends are quiet, enduring, and tender. They don't roar, but they linger, leaving traces that ripple through every corner of the world. And in this soft, timeless moment, you let yourself exhale, the gentle magic of Minerva McGonagall's legacy settling around you, a lullaby of wisdom, courage, and calm, carrying you slowly toward sleep, toward dreams, toward the quiet knowledge that the most powerful magic is sometimes the one that shapes a hearts, minds, and generations long after the wand is laid down.